Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So, that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit Loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Sharon G. Flake. Sharon is a celebrated author with multiple honors, including 2 Coretta Scott King Honor Awards. Her novels have brought a bold dimension to literature for young people, selling more than 1 million copies worldwide and reaching readers across the globe. While her body of work includes dozens of novels, chapter books, and illustrated works, today we are focusing on the I'm In series and celebrating the 3rd release, The Family I'm In. This book explores the complex relationship between Black boys and their fathers, highlighting the challenges they face while growing up and defining what it means to be a man amidst societal pressures. I can't count how many times I've read her earlier books in the series, so I am so excited to explore this new one together. So let's get right to it. Sharon, welcome to the KidLit Love podcast. I'm so excited you're here today.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, KidLit audience.
Yes. As I mentioned in the opening, I've lost count of how many times I have gotten to read The Skin I'm In, and The Life I'm In, because it is required reading and required joyful reading in my children's literature university classes. We have the best time reading, discussing, talking, powerful conversations, connections, community, all the things that books can do. Your books have done in that class. And so I feel like a little kid right now that I get to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professors and colleges and students have been really so supportive. Maybe 15 years ago, I realized that the real connection when I went to a reception in DC. I think it had something to do with schools. And this girl was like, "Can you just stay a little longer?" Well, she was an adult. "Can you stay a little longer? Because my boyfriend is coming and his professor taught your book, The Skin I'm In, and he's been teaching it for 5 years, and then it's like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It might have been, maybe it was 20 years ago, but it's like, oh, I get to see this connection. So you all are still teaching it, and
Mhm.
young teachers are still picking it up. And so I really am grateful to you all.
Oh, well, we're still teaching it and picking it up for good reasons, which we get to talk about today as you celebrate your 3rd book in the I'm In series. But before we get to the books, I was hoping that we could chat about you. And you could give us a little bit of backstory, the journey of yours that you've taken through children's literature to being here today.
You know, I tell people I remember reading I think in Brown Girl Dreaming, Jackie Woodson's book. I think when she was 8, she knew she wanted to win some of the highest prizes in literature. And I thought, oh, what was I thinking at 8, right? Wasn't writing. I didn't, and nobody told me. I always say nobody told me I could write, but the last 2 years I found a publication from middle school where it had poetry in them. And I was like the youngest person. I don't even remember that. I had the youngest person in that book. Everybody else was like 8th graders. I was like 7th graders. It wasn't a very good poem. Some people had really great poems. I did not. So I'm not even sure how I got it. Did I ask, did somebody recognize my talent? But it was nice to be there. I really didn't start writing until I was in college, and I, really sort of stumbled into it because I wanted to be a doctor, and that, of course, did not work out. And then, I wrote fiction, nonfiction, off and on for years, and then my daughter was born. And Brittany is 37 now, so she was born, and I started telling her all kinds of stories about dark-skinned girls who could fly and do magic and all kinds of stuff. And then I started to write consistently and produce consistently. Before then, I might write a short story today, and maybe I write another one that year, but maybe I wouldn't write for 2 years in terms of that sort of thing. But something about her helped me become disciplined and focused. I had already always been telling young people stories, even in college, from teenage perspective mostly. So that wasn't new, but I think the consistency to show up in the morning and produce regularly, I attribute to her. And also, she showed up in the world dark brown and beautiful. And so I started dealing with the issue of dark brown skin. And obviously the skin I'm in, I tell people it's not her story. She was much, much younger at that point. So that sort of was my journey. The first person who read the skin I'm in bought it. That doesn't happen all the time,
Mm.
right? So then it became sort of this rocket ship experience. And what a world, people, it's an amazing world to be a part of,
Mhm.
the KidLit community, publishing and writing for children. And the other side, going and visiting schools, having conversations with young people. I always tell people we grew up together. I was first published at 42, so I was full grown. But I also had my own insecurities. And I tell people, if God had told me, like, you're going to have to go to schools and make visits and give public speeches, I would say, no. Now, somebody might say, well, didn't you notice? Somewhere maybe way back in my brain, but mostly no, not consciously.
Mhm.
Um, and so, they got to see me nervous and skittish and trying to figure my way out. And together we started, just being who we were, growing up together. So I feel like I grew up with my audience, even though I was twice as old as my audience.
Yes. I love that because that's the spirit in the books that we're talking about today too, right? It is growing up. It is becoming whoever we are. It's figuring everything out in that particular phase. So it sounds like your books kind of have this parallel line of you and your readers figuring it all out together.
Yeah, I like that. Absolutely. The family I'm in is about John, and his friend Caleb, two boys from the original skin I'm in. And John wants what a lot of guys his age wants. He wants a girlfriend. He wants to be kissed for the first time. We don't think about boys who are about 16 and a half, that being like a problem or a challenge, right? But that is a problem and a challenge for him. And another challenge is having a dad who does love him, does provide, but also sort of wishes he had a different kind of son.
Mhm.
Like John is a nerd. John is the only boy in the girls' book club. He does archery. His father would much rather be able to brag to his friends, you know what? My boy shot 60 points, doing a high school basketball team, right? He'd much rather, oh, my boy, you know how many girls asked him to the prom? It was 100,
That's
right?
right.
He would much rather to have that for his son. So John, in terms of growing, has to learn how to figure out how to help his father understand I'm my own person, sort of my own man, while he's still struggling with being his own person and his own man. And then you have Caleb, whose father is ill. And Caleb, again, has a stand up father. And he decided, listen, this man is everything to me. I am going to, stand in his shoes. I'm going to work. I'm going to earn money. I'm going to pay bills. I'm going to do it all. But it starts to wear on Caleb because he is not an adult. And then you have the two fathers, right? You have one father, Caleb's father, who really is the person that John can come to and emotionally be vulnerable and say what he really feels about whatever in life, no matter how off or crazy it might be, right? That he could say it, or how serious and deep about his father, he can have those kind of conversations. But the father, Caleb's father, can't exactly have those conversations like, hey, I feel like I'm losing control. I feel like I'm not the man I used to be. I feel like my son is the man of the house. He can't really share those, he can't really be vulnerable the way he was before. And
Yeah.
neither can John's father in a lot of ways, because he's getting older. He talks about his knees hurting. He
Yeah.
makes a couple of references. I think he is sort of the community hero. Um, he is an old school father that believes in, um, you know, paying the way and being responsible for the family, but the weight is on his shoulders. And periodically, you get to hear him say, you know, the weight, there's a weight there. He doesn't say it often. You got to look between the cracks. So they're all sort of figuring out this journey of masculinity, of manhood, of what does it look like, and who can I be in it, and who can I tell about it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which are, when you think of that period of time, these young adult readers, all of that and more, right, is just constantly swirling around. And there's just such a realness and a approachability to the book of like this is real, right? We all have real families and real complicated families and real love interests and real wonderings of who are we and are my parents liking it or not liking it. And what I love that happened is you have John, or maybe I should say John.
Yeah, I should say John too.
You have Caleb. You also have the other characters, and they're all just growing together amidst these changes from school to summer, growing up, getting mature, changing families. There's all just so much that readers could relate to and find an entry point into, and just get lost in that story. Like it's one of those books where you ignore the dishes and you ignore the laundry and you ignore whatever it is you're reading so that you can see what happens to this wonderful cast of characters.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I tell people I write simplistically complex so that one of the other hosts from a radio show said, "Oh, my 10-year-old, I gave it to him and he's really enjoying it." So it's something that your 10-year-old could read. There's nothing inappropriate in it, but it's also something your 16, 17-year-old, I think, will want to read. And all of my books are sort of like that, right? And so depending on where you're at age and experience, you will find sort of what you need within that world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Well, this 47, almost 47-year-old read it through the lens of a mom. And that's
Ooh,
yet another layer of,
that's
okay,
right.
the things I say, how are they conveyed? The things I really mean, but how am I expressing it? And do my actions show something else? I was all wrapped up in that aspect of the story for me because that's the lens, that I'm in with three older teenagers. So
Right. Are they boys?
I have two boys. I have one son who is 20, and then I have twins who just turned 18, boy, girl.
Okay. Okay. Well, I hadn't thought about the moms of boys, to be honest, but I wanted to really create something where men and fathers and sons, men and boys could could gather around sort of the book and read it and have some of those conversations about where that relationship between those boys and those fathers and the boys themselves. And even in terms of girls, John is desperate to have a girlfriend.
Mhm.
And he is a kid that will let himself be vulnerable. So you may almost expose himself too much in terms of being able to, say everything he's thinking and feeling about that girl. But at the same time, he makes some comments about girls that I wanted in there. Um, where he says, like, when Malika says, "Oh, I didn't get that internship because that boy got it and he doesn't have the resume I have." And John says, "Well, it's about time boys got something and he probably needed it more than you anyway. After all, girls, they're getting everything." Basically meaning they're the head of this club and that organization. They're president of the class. And I wanted that conversation. And he says something when a girl has on clothes
Yes.
that he thinks are, well, her clothes give me give me privilege to do what I want. And I wasn't saying that because I wanted to criticize him or judge him. Some people might say, well, we should, but I think you do need to give young men the opportunity to have these conversations
Mhm.
without necessarily clamping down and saying what we think they should think, because if you don't, they don't get to grow and develop. If you do, they don't get to grow and develop. And what they'll do, I don't know. I keep telling everybody about Netflix Adolescence. They should pay me for talking about the show. Did you get to see that?
I've just started it actually, so I do know it just a little.
And I won't give anything away, but what you'll find is he's sort of in a cocoon. Him and his friends, they're in this world of what they think about girls and what girls they think have done stuff to them. And I'm not saying some of it's not legitimate pain or anything. That's not even it. But the world is small. And I think because we don't always give them um the opportunity and the space to say some of them what they want to hear, what they want to say, or they need to say. I think we don't often let boys be vulnerable enough
Yeah.
to, and I think what I will tell parents or say to parents, I won't tell them, I'll say that books do give young men and women the opportunity to be open up and be vulnerable. And I see it, the skin I'm in. I was in New York in January of last year. It was the winter time. And we're taking pictures, and a young boy stands behind me. He's like 14. And he says, Miss Sharon, I'm Malika. And I knew just what he meant. I am being bullied. But it turns out he wasn't being bullied. He was. Then he turned into a bully. And
Mhm.
now he's sort of like in recovery, right? He's like, now I've learned that is not the way. But when I say that, those intimate moments when I go to schools, and in the book, you might remember when John says early on, girls don't want nice boys. Years ago, a football player, a very handsome, I think he was like ninth or 10th grade football player, came to me at the end of a book discussion on Who Am I Without Him, right? Which is the most of the characters are girls talking about boys. And he said, Miss, girls don't want nice boys. And it stuck with me all those years. That here we don't think about. He's a handsome football player. We think he could get anybody.
Yeah.
And here he's saying basically, I'm a nice boy and they don't want me.
Mhm.
Right. And
Mhm.
so books allow, I think, young people to be vulnerable, to open up and say, hey, I'm not the only one being teased. I'm not the only 16-and-a-half-year-old boy that doesn't have a girl, or what John's father would say, can't get a girl. And how does that make me feel? Well, I'm the boy that, is wide open like John, and I'm like, yeah, I really like you, and I'm calling you, and I'm talking about you all that, right? And so I wanted to show that side of of masculinity, of boyhood, and at the same time showing them tripping over their feet maybe and saying things that we don't necessarily want them to say, but it's part of their brain and what they're thinking, so that they could have more conversations about that.
Mhm. Yeah, it reminds me of, that research that I dive into when all of a sudden I'm a parent of teenagers, which reminds parents that those frontal lobes are not fully developed and they're supposed to say things that aren't the greatest and they're supposed to mess up because they're figuring it out. And there is one point of the book, and there's so many sticky notes here, Sharon. I can't find which sticky note it is that I could bring up, but it's a part where it's John's inner dialogue of he's saying one thing to his dad and he's thinking another, and he's thinking that stuff that he wishes he could say, like, give me space, let me
I
do
don't
stuff.
know where we're at exactly, but I remember that
Yeah,
just he
that
didn't say
was.
that to his father. It's
Mhm.
about girls, or it's about how he's feeling. And his father is answering, trying to meet his needs emotionally with stuff and things, right? Like with shoes, but I will say, but his father's very present. He
Mhm.
he sees him every week. And when it gets to this age, you might say, yeah, I don't want to be bothered, right?
Yeah.
There's his parents are divorced, so he sees him every week. They go to Home Depot, they go to eat. When they go to eat, his father's talking about, getting people's sons jobs. And his father is very much a man, again, that feels like his job as man is to take care of the world and to
Mhm.
fix the world. And he can't exactly fix his son in a sense because he doesn't have that, he won't allow himself to be vulnerable. He wasn't raised like that. So having to, it's funny talking to a couple of male interviewers who have been saying about their relationships with their dads. And so I'm hoping um for room and space to see, how are boys doing?
Mhm.
No. What do you need? How are we doing well by you? How are we doing not doing well by you? And have us as a society say it is okay to ask both boys and girls this stuff,
Mhm.
right? It's okay that by asking boys this and creating text for them doesn't exclude girls from being in that conversation as well. But I didn't want to use it as a tool where people can say, see, like, no, boys, this is not what you do, because that is not going to be helpful to them or that conversation. And
Mhm.
by finding out, what do you think about John? John, what do you think about that? Do you think girls sort of are running the world, sort of? And it gives girls space to comment and say, no, we really work hard for those positions and we really go for this. And, a full dialogue, and the boys may agree or not. They may not agree with each other. I just always wanted to just create space for conversation.
Mhm.
I trust that I've had some great conversations in school with young people because trusting them with the material,
Mhm.
that they will meet the moment. You're always going to have somebody from the back of the room saying, and yeah, Mary smells or something, something that's like off the mark, and you just deal with it, teachers deal with it, keep on going. But I'm really excited. I'm hoping that it does for young men what the Skin I'm In did for girls. And it's not that the Skin I'm In didn't do a lot for boys, because I have boys telling me some of the same things, but clearly it was, I think, more impactful with girls, even though it was very impactful with boys, more impactful. And I'll just tell you this one thing: went to New York for, I think, University of Pennsylvania had a summer program. They had a boy that wouldn't read anything, and they gave him the Skin I'm In. He was a Latino boy. Took it home. He loved it so much he translated into Spanish for his grandmother. That is the
Oh.
power of books. That is what young men will do, because we say they won't read. When you get a book in their hands, that means something to them. So I'm hoping that the book will also mean something to them.
Yeah. And I think that's why I loved the bookmobile. So Mr. Young, the librarian, I think one of my favorite lines. Is it okay if I read it word for word from the book?
Sure.
Okay. It was about the bookmobile, and the librarian is saying, if someone doesn't return a book, I'd like to think they enjoyed it so much they could not bear to part from it. Books can heal the world, literacy too, right? There it is, right there. Books have the power to do so, so very much.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and together with teachers and librarians and parents and students, we have to just make sure that we get the books into their hands and trust that they will read it. I know it's tough times out here, in a lot of ways and a lot of spaces, but I think giving them books right now is one of the best things we could do. And they could be happy books, they could be sad books, they could be, I think when you're living in tough times, sometimes people think, well, we need all happy. Well, sometimes, you want happy, but sometimes you want something that reflects where you're at too. This is a combination, right? John is very funny.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
very funny. He's gonna say the wrong thing. He's very funny. He's very, like, show you your heart. I think for people that love
Mhm.
Shar has grown between, she almost has more space than Malika, but I've always been afraid to touch Malika after I wrote her initially. That's why you don't see much of her in both books, because I'm afraid of her. She's so wonderful. But Shar, from that second book to this book, you get to see, wow,
Yes.
she evolved into quite the person. Malika too, but but yeah.
I'm glad that you mentioned the the middle book, right? So we have the skin I'm in, the life I'm in, the family I'm in. And I
Yeah.
admit when I first went to the life I'm in, I thought, "Oh man, how am I going to like her?" That was a rough character in the first book. And then you remind yourself that everybody has a story and everybody has something, and you end up loving her, in the subsequent books. So you do such a great job of pulling those characters to life in those different ways across all three of them.
Thank you. Thank you. And Charlize, people would say, I tell people she's like the perfect literary villain in a way. Nobody liked her, but everybody asked about her.
Yeah.
They wanted to know, is she okay? Whatever became of that Charlize bully girl? And
Right.
so this was sort of that answer. It's a book about trafficking, but I remind people it's a book about second chances. It's a
Yeah.
book about forgiveness. Where is God in our mess? Right? Remember that scene when and she's like, I don't want God to sort of see me here. And I wanted to deal with issues of forgiveness and second chances. And it's also where you get to see Malika shine, where for the first time, Malika has boundaries, right? If you keep doing this, Shar, we don't get to see her with any real clear boundaries in the skin. I'm into the very end. So she has boundaries. And
Mm.
so each book, they're all growing and
Yeah.
they're all maturing. And it's life. So you trip and you fall and you get back up. They all like you'll always find in all of my books that there is community, whether
Mhm.
there's in the skin I'm in, the teacher's supportive, so is her mother and her father who passed.
Yeah.
If you look at the life I'm in, the men that show up for Shar,
Mhm.
that was important to me when you're dealing with something like human trafficking, that men and boys know there's a role for you in this. On this journey, you can help get women and girls to the other side. And so there are guys and men in there that play an important role. It's a smaller role, but it's an important role for her. And here you have these young men. And again, I'm always like, I don't know what's going to happen in the book other than I'm writing about human trafficking, I'm writing about dark skin, I'm writing about these boys. But I know that I want people to see that these young people have a community standing behind them. That
Mhm.
community can look different ways. I want people to know that they're dealing with moral issues, all of us, all the time,
Yeah.
right? And morality is not all sex. Like we think, oh, it's sex, it's drugs. It's not that. It's choices. What
Mhm.
does Caleb do when his father is ill? I love the scene where they're walking the father, but I had an ill grandfather. And so when they're exercising him, I
Mhm.
drew on that because we used to, at young age, have to help wash him up and, feed him, give him a cigarette. Back then, now they'd be like, what kind of mother? Like my cigarette, and I like your cigarette, give him orange juice, go to the store. And
Mhm.
so I wanted people to see them nurturing him. And those boys nurture Caleb's father well.
They do.
They nurture him well. They're goofy sometimes too, right? They're
Yes.
fighting each other, but so
Yeah.
there's this hodgepodge of stuff going on.
Yeah. Now, I would love to ask you how you do something, because when I think back on my own teenage years, I not only don't really remember exactly how it felt, but I don't know if I want to sometimes. And I would love to know, how do you, because we're there. You take us right back. You take us into their stuff, into our own stuff. How do you keep that mindset of being that young adult and being in that phase just so clear and front and present for us?
Because I'm really like 10 or 15. Sometimes my daughter's 37. I'm like, she's really the adult. I think I remember what it's like, but I've always had a very terrible memory, even when I was 20. A temporary storehouse. As I get older, I said, maybe you shouldn't say that, but I've always had that. And I think God had to do something a little bit different with me and basically gave me the ability to feel at a very, very deep level. Also gave me parents that were storytellers. My grandmother, my aunt, they come over, they have a little gin, they have some pig feet, hog mogs, fried chicken, and they would sit around and all the stories that they would tell. And they would always have sound effects in their stories. And you know what I mean? And John was walking down the street and he went boom, 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 boom. You know what I mean? And so, and I didn't think they were stories at the time, but I realized, oh, they were my storytellers. They were the ones that showed me that, oh, story, there was, you're right. And so,
Yeah.
because didn't hold a lot of that stuff in, I think either my body holds it in and my heart holds it in. And then I think another thing when you talk about the immediacy is I grew up in a family that didn't look far up the road. And I don't know if that's a lot of Black people. I don't know. I don't know if that's people, excuse of, I would say limit. Well, we weren't poor, but average people. I don't know. But we didn't look up the road. I didn't know that at the time. I've only realized that in the last like 15, 20 years. So sort of like day to day, like day to day. It's like, okay, what are you going to do today? You got to have something for Sunday. But I realized they didn't look up the road a lot. So I didn't look up the road. And for me to look up the road was very frightening. Like they just in general, it's like, okay, like I want to go on vacation. This is going to sound really crazy. And I'm always putting off vacations because I like, okay, we're gonna go here. Here, I'll have 17 things on the table. I get overwhelmed because there's too many choices. And I can't like, okay, if you just start in January and just pick one, you can have it. So it's very difficult to look up the road. So what does that mean for me as a writer? That I'm only looking at scene by pay by not scene by sentence by sentence.
Mhm.
That's how I'm telling my story. And so I realized that it has a certain amount of immediacy for people. And you
Yes.
take that with I've always, I grew up loving television. Television moves fast.
Yeah.
I also have sort of maybe a boy brain in a way. Like, even though people say we can see everything so clearly in your book, and you really can, but what you don't see is I don't spend a lot of time like describing people's hair or the flowers on the wall or the things on their clothes. The
Mhm.
things that I always consider, I don't really care about that. But I get a book that opens up with all that, and I'm like, I don't want to read that. I just want you to tell me the story.
Yes.
I just want you to tell me the story. And I think in that sense, boys are very much like that. I just want you to tell me the story. And so I
Yeah.
just tell them the story. They have a lot of visual in there. You can see a lot, you can hear a lot. You're in that place in that scene.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question. That was
You
long.
did. Yeah, you did. And that just hearing you.
How can I be? And here's the other thing. I try to erase myself for the most part from the page. I try not to show up as the writer. That means that I am flattening some words. Like some people might say, oh, well, she doesn't use, I don't know, the lexicon words or so and so, which probably hurts me for awards or something like that. But it's intentional.
Yeah.
I want to be invisible. Now, in the life I'm in, here's what's interesting. There's a little bit of a literary style, just a little bit. That book, I ended up as a finalist for a $50,000 literary prize. And I'm like, yeah, I had to go a little literary for you guys to do that when this is just,
Yeah.
it's like, so that's the other thing.
Mhm.
I try, and so young people will say, like, did you write this book? Like, are you like, right? Because I'm trying from the very beginning, I was like, I don't want you to see me here.
Yeah.
I just want you to see the characters.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll see some of my older work. You might see a little bit more of me, but not a whole lot. I try to be fairy. I just want you to see this world and
Hmm.
not, oh, the writer just showed up.
Right. Right. That's it. It. Yes. I'll just say yes. That's exactly what it feels like. You feel each moment in the book, and some of the chapters are quite short, some are a little bit longer, and you get that sense of time, and just get so caught up in that scene in that moment. And now I can see the how and why. Like looking back, it's like you're right. You're not there. I am just there with the character, and that is it. And that's why it feels so personal.
You see me a little bit. Every once in a while, you might see a word. Sometimes I get lazy because really to use either or I don't know what a more sophisticated or bigger word really sometimes is easier than just to say because to leave it out, I might have to use 5 words,
Hmm.
right? To
Yeah.
say, to not say she was frustrated. Although you could say that, that's not the word I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else. But to show frustration
Yes.
sometimes takes more words than, you know.
Yeah.
I feel so, I'm like, I love what I do. I feel very fortunate. Even after all these years, I
Yeah.
feel like the luckiest woman on earth. Not just because, like, kids think, oh, it's because you can see your books, on the shelves in the store. No, I just get to do good on the planet with my work. I get to, I love being in the company of young people. And we feed off each other and they bless me and I hope I bless them with my work and when I show up in their spaces. And then I've gotten all this good feedback about the work. And as somebody that spent a lot of their life feeling small and feeling little, to feel like, hey, and so God took that person and spoke to all the people, all the kids on the earth that have felt small and little. And a lot of them have said, you know what, because of that, I don't feel as small and little anymore.
That's right.
That's heavy lifting. I was telling somebody else about the Skin I'm in has done some heavy lifting.
Mhm.
And with the help of teachers and parents and librarians, and young people that might have done the heaviest lifting of it all, which
Yeah.
is take text, internalize it, and use it consciously or not to on your journey,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Taking that next step and saying, because of this character, because of this work, because of this teacher that gave me the book, or my mom who bought this book, I can, I'm going to do this. I could maybe not feel so small and little. I
Yeah.
could be more hopeful.
And I see that again and again and again every time I read this book, even no matter their age, if they're young adults, if they're older adults like me, I see it. This book has that spark to just get people talking, to get those conversations. Like the librarian said, right? They can heal. And
Right, right.
so
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, did the librarian say that? Or did the mother say that? Was it the librarian?
I think it was Mr. Young. Um, let's see. Yes, yes, it was. Because John was kind of surprised when he said, we know most books won't be returned. That's good. Because it's
And
expensive.
yeah, because he says before then, he says, don't you know those books ain't coming back? You can tell them books they don't have to return these books. Those books are not coming back. And
Yeah.
John, but at the same time, I forgot about Mr. Young. John ends up doing some stuff I think that sort of he models because of him,
Yeah.
right? When he decides to give, oh, that girl that, she never can come down to get the book and I'll have her get, yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah. The journey is just of all the characters is beautiful, but that was a nice little full circle moment with that bookmobile. And I don't want to do it, but I'm doing it. And oh, as I'm figuring out what I want, maybe this is kind of me. Just so no spoilers, listeners, but so many good moments wrapped in.
I think, just before a book comes out, I know for me, I start panicking. I'm like, I'm just terrible. Oh my God. And then so to hear people's feedback and say, okay, no, we really like it. We think it's really good. It's like, okay. Because you lose perspective too. People don't have any idea how many times we have to read our own books. Like, and like right now, like you think I'd read it. It's like, what? I think I might throw up. I read it like hundreds, literally probably 30 times. And you can't like,
Yeah.
but it's funny. I have people write me all the time and say, I read the book, like I read the Skin I'm in every year or every 5 years. And I'm like, whoa, okay. But anyway.
Yeah. So as you think about this third book going out there, I'd love my last question to you to be about your hopes for the book and your hopes for readers.
Well, my hope is that young men, boys and fathers, sons will will share the book and read it together and just have a multitude of conversations that
Yeah.
synagogues and churches and mosques that gather men and boys together will say, hey, maybe this is one we can take on, because what we're saying is boys are having a moment right now.
Mhm.
People are saying that they don't have enough organizations to support boys, and they need a lot of support now. That more boys are depressed, suicidal, lonely, not knowing how to engage with. Right. So this is one of the tools in the tool chest. Because I don't assume that men and boys and fathers and organizations aren't doing anything, but I think we all need tools in the tool chest.
Yeah.
And so becomes one of those. Will be It'll be funny. It's not all serious, but it'll make space for those conversations. I've had men in the past reach out to me and say, you help me understand my son better. You help me understand my daughter better. So I know that books can be valuable in helping that kind of thing happen. That my hope is also that we will remember that boys will read, because we have a
Mhm.
tendency to say, well, they don't read.
Do.
We have a tendency now to say, kids won't read. Yeah, they will. Or kids will only read, well, the books are too long. And I'm not saying, all books don't have to be the same length, but I can assure you that children will read longer books if they are engaged in that book. If
Yes.
that book won't turn them go, they will read it. So we have to make sure that we're giving them books that match with them, and that'll be good for them.
Yeah. And I could pretty much 100% guarantee that if they read one of these three, they're coming back for them all.
Okay, thank you. Well, I
Okay.
met a boy last year who had spent some time in juvenile. He was at school, librarian, said, well, he came back, and I said, okay, he wanted the book. I gave him the skin I'm in. He came back, I think the next day or 2 days later. This is a high school student, and he plowed through the life I'm in,
Yeah.
and I think in a very short order. And so, I think, we just have to believe they will read, make
Mhm.
space and room for them, and realize that a lot of them are having a moment, and we have to give them space to have conversations about what they're going through. And
Yeah.
then the other side,
Oh,
and keep hope alive, people.
that's right. Oh, I've loved chatting with you today. Thank you so much. Where is the best place that listeners can find you online and keep up with you and find all the books?
SharonGFlake.com is my website. And if you want me for a school visit, all you have to go on there. It comes right to where my email, I'm on email all day long. You probably hear from me the same day. Um, I'm on all the social media outlets, so people reach me there. Um, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. You can buy the book anywhere. Start maybe with your local bookstore, but you certainly can get it from the big boxes and the online ones as well. And if they don't have it there, just ask them to order it, and they shall.
Yeah.
It hits, today's the day it's out there. So
I know we're recording on your book birthday. Happy birthday.
mm,
I will gather all those links and social handles you mentioned. I'll make sure to put them in the show notes. And of course, I'll put links to all three of the books so that listeners can dive in. Thank you so much, Sharon. This was such a joy and a pleasure. And I can't wait to not only have the books that I'll ask my students to read, but now they can listen to us talk about them too. So thank you.
of course, thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I'll see you in the next one.
See
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you loved what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.